Good day, I'm Kristen Welker, live in Washington, in for Andrea Mitchell. President Obama pushing back forcefully against bipartisan criticism over his administration swapping 5 Taliban detainees for Sergeant Bowe Bergdahl, telling reporters in Belgium politics didn't play a role in a decision made without consent from Congress.
I think it was important for people to understand that this is not some abstraction. This is not a political football. You have a couple of parents whose kid volunteered to fight in a distant land, who they hadn't seen in 5 years and weren't sure whether they'd ever see again. And as Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces, I am responsible for those kids.
And the great Andrea Mitchell does join us now live from Normandy. We will talk more about the D-Day anniversary tomorrow in just a moment. But first, Andrea, I want to get your reaction to what we heard from President Obama. He gave a robust defense of that deal, but he sideswiped really the question about not notifying Congress. What do you make of his comments today?
Well, he's fighting back. They did not expect this to blow up as badly as it has. And he's fighting back with the commander-in-chief argument, with the argument that you don't leave your soldiers behind on the battlefield, and that those parents deserve to have their son returned. I mean, it's an emotional argument, but it's not a legal argument. What Congress is saying, and this includes Democrats, as you know, Kristen, as well as Republicans, is that there is a legal obligation to notify Congress 30 days in advance. And what Congress is also saying to the president's argument that they had to move quickly, that security was very important, that this was a tense moment and they had to deal with it delicately. Well, they would say, and they have said, we knew about the bin Laden raid, which was a much higher security priority and much more certain to, need to avoid leaks. And they knew about that for months in advance and, in fact, for days beforehand. So they were notified of that raid. Why not of this exchange?
Andrea, the other big issue that has overshadowed this trip of the president's, of course, the crisis in Ukraine, the rift with Russian President Vladimir Putin. I want to play you a little bit of what President Obama had to say about President Putin and then get your reaction on the other side. Take a listen.
I have no doubt that I'll see Mr. Putin, and he and I have always had a business-like relationship. Should we have the opportunity to talk, I will be repeating the same message that I've been delivering to him throughout this crisis.
So, Andrea, it sounds like the president is preparing to have some type of interaction with Putin. Do you anticipate that's what's going to happen, and will that make any type of a difference?
It's unavoidable for them to see each other. They are world leaders gathering here for the commemorations. Russia suffered grievously in World War II. As the president said today, it is entirely appropriate that he be here. But the fact is that Putin is kind of crashing this party, and the other allies, the other key allies in Western Europe, don't seem to mind that at all. In fact, while President Obama has tried to isolate him and not have him at that G7 meeting, it would have been the G8 before the annexation of Crimea and what has been happening in eastern Ukraine. Well, the fact is that President Hollande has invited him to supper, we're told, at the Élysée Palace tonight, after he has an earlier dinner with President Obama, that he's also going to be meeting with Prime Minister Cameron and with Angela Merkel. So the other allies are not doing what the U.S. had really expected and hoped, isolating Vladimir Putin. He's being welcomed back into the fold. And while they did make statements coming out of Brussels, the statements were not as strong as what the U.S. had hoped for in terms of threatening increased sanctions against Putin for what he's already done, not just what he prospectively might do.
Quick follow-up on that point, Andrea, as you mentioned, some discussions on the sidelines about potentially increasing sanctions. No real threat of that, though. How's Putin responding to that? Well,
and in fact, President Hollande is continuing with an arms export to Russia, and the president had to acknowledge at that news conference that they disagree with the French about that. So the French are not doing any favors to President Obama and the U.S. position here. And I think Vladimir Putin might be strutting a little bit when he gets to Normandy.
And Andrea, we're going to talk about this more in depth later in the show, but set the scene for us there right now, if you would, there in Normandy, as you prepare to mark this anniversary tomorrow.
I can't even convey just how emotional and meaningful this is to people of all generations. I was here when Ronald Reagan spoke, you are the boys of Pointe du Hoc for the 40th anniversary. I was here with Bill Clinton for the 50th. And the fact is that this, I mean, you can see I am surrounded by the crosses and the Stars of David and the other headstones for more than 10,000 men who died here. And they died so that the rest of the world could be free. So you see the flags and the welcome here for the British and the Americans and the Canadians who stormed these beaches is extraordinary. And we see these 90-year-old and 92 and 95-year-old men returning 70 years later, and it is quite extraordinary. And some of them coming back. We've been doing interviews with college students who are coming with them. They're trying to pass on what they've learned and what they experienced so it is not forgotten.
Andrea, thank you for that perspective, and we look forward to talking to you more in depth a little bit later on the show.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.